Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the tavern. Today we will be reviewing the new-ish release from Darrington Press, Daggerheart. The book was launched on the 20th of May of 2025 and has come out to mostly positive reviews. I will be trying to give you my unfiltered opinion of the game system, and I will start by saying right away that I like Daggerheart. And if you've watched some of my other content, you may have picked up on that already. As a more narrative-focused DM, the system plays to a lot of my strengths. And if you are a theater kid at heart, I'm sure this will be the system for you. That's not to say I don't think there are some weaknesses and flaws, and I'll cover those as well. So without any further ado, let's talk about Daggerheart. When it was first announced back in 2023, it went through a few public playtests as well as an open beta for about a year until it was released. Given what I saw of the game back then and what we got as full release, I think this playtesting was wildly successful and fixed a lot of the issues that we saw early on in the game. For example, the armor system used to be pretty convoluted and hard to implement in actual play. And now it's a pretty simple system, but still remains tactically crunchy, with some classes able to manipulate it alongside some magical items as well. I think more games should implement development cycles like this to root out any problems in the gameplay early on, many of which only come out during actual play. Now, we can't talk about Daggerheart without talking about the big mechanical difference in duality dice. In Daggerheart, instead of rolling a d20 for skill checks, you'll roll two d12s of differing colors. One will be your hope dice, and the other will be your fear dice. The total will determine whether or not you are successful at your skill check, but which of the two dice is higher will determine whether the roll was with hope or with fear. Here's an example. The bard in your group wants to make a presence check. This is essentially charisma in D&D, to convince the shopkeeper to divulge the identity of the bandit that the party is tracking. The bard has a +2 in their presence and rolls their duality dice. The hope die shows a 7 and the fear die shows a 5, for a total of 14 with their bonus. In this case, the hope die is higher than the fear die, so the roll is a 14 with hope. Whether or not the roll succeeds, the player will receive a hope. This is a resource we will discuss more later, but just know that it powers certain abilities in your class. If instead the die rolls were reversed, and the 7 was on the dice with a fear, it would now be a 14 with fear. In this case, it'll mean that the DM gains a fear. Once again, we will discuss this a little further, but just know that fear is a resource that the DM can use to further complicate any encounters. In the case of any duality dice roll in Daggerheart, there are 4 possible outcomes: a success or failure with hope, or a success or failure with fear. In both cases, either the player or the DM is generating some kind of resource. This success or failure with hope or fear will also change the outcome of the skill check narratively. A success with hope is the best possible outcome, and will usually result in the player getting what they want. However, a success with fear is slightly more complicated. It maybe means that the task was harder or more disturbing to complete. The same goes for failing skill checks. A failure with hope is somewhat softened, where a failure with fear is the worst possible outcome, and usually strikes disaster. I see this system as both a strength and a weakness. For some DMs, like myself, this will just play right into how you were already running the game anyways. For others, I see this as a bit of a barrier to entry, but is easy to solve. Just don't make every roll have some kind of narrative complication due to rolling with hope or fear. Of course, in this case, Daggerheart recommends that maybe you didn't need a roll there in the first place. But even with paring back how many rolls you ask for, but coming up with some narrative weight to any roll at the drop of a dime is not every DM's forte. If you aren't the best at improvisation, this may be a good house rule for you to implement when you play Daggerheart. Just let your players know beforehand. Finally, there is a 5th possible outcome. Any roll of doubles is considered a critical success. In this case, the players gain a hope, clear a stress, and get some extra benefit that the DM can decide on. My go-to is giving them advantage on their next strike or duality dice roll. I personally love the duality dice system, and I think it changes how players approach certain tasks. One comparison I'll make to D&D here is a difference that I spotted on my player's first skill check when playing Daggerheart. They, of course, all wanted to roll. This has always been a bit of a DM discretion thing, when you call for a skill check and multiple players want to roll to increase their odds of success. In Daggerheart, this is balanced by what happened to my players on their first instinct roll to follow the scent of their first ingredient in the Beast Feast setting. More than half of them rolled with fear, meaning off the first roll, I began stockpiling my resources as a DM, and I made sure that my players knew it. Unfortunately, we were playing on Roll20, and there is no visible fear tracker yet, but I would recommend, whether you're playing online or in person, make sure your players know how much fear you have. I would love to see this implemented soon for Roll20, as I think the system was designed with this interaction in mind. Next, let's talk about Daggerheart's initiative system, or the lack thereof. Daggerheart uses no formal initiative system, instead being more loose and opting for letting players decide when they get to go. But if they fail a roll, or roll with fear, the DM gets to activate or spotlight an enemy. This back and forth really solves a lot of the issues of the rigid D&D initiative system, and allows DMs more freedom to use individual enemies that can take more turns in combat, rather than lots of enemies to even out the action economy between you and your players. This can feel a little awkward, especially in larger parties, but in that case, I would use their alternative initiative system, the Spotlight Tracker. This gives players some action tokens. They recommend 3 to start, which they can spend to take actions. Once all of these are spent, they must wait until every other player has spent all of their action tokens to get any more. This can really help at a table where a player is really eager to get in the spotlight, or at larger tables. Also, the DM is able to interrupt a player's turn. I like to do this at the end of their turn, that's just me, by spending a fear to instantly spotlight an enemy. This is where that stockpile of fear will really put your players on notice to how much they let you have. And if you're finding the balance of this to be a little bit too much for newer players, you can institute a cap to how much fear you can be holding at any one time. Further to this point, Daggerheart also uses a loose range system, using phrases like very close or far to give an idea of the range of some abilities. The idea of these looser combat systems is to make it feel like it's rolling by a little bit faster, and making it feel a little more cinematic, instead of worrying about perfect positioning and only on your turn in initiative. This results in a more cinematic feeling combat, but it may result in missing some of that tactical crunch that some players might be looking for. In that case, Daggerheart also features an alternative rule for their range system, where they convert their terms like very close to mean a number of hexes or squares. I won't go over the exact conversions here, but it does seem to work out a little bit better for an online game, for example. The final thing that I want to talk about Daggerheart combat is the tag team system, as well as hope as a resource, which for me is one of the best parts. Throughout the game, you'll be picking up hope and spending it when you need to. Many of your class features, abilities, spells, other things are hope-based, meaning that you have to spend hope to activate them. One of these is the tag team system. Any 2 players can collaborate to take their turn together by spending 3 hope each and taking a tag team action, working together to describe how that action looks. Just a note that tag team rolls can only be initiated once per session by the same players, but they can be very powerful if used for an attack. Both players will roll their duality dice, and in this case, select which ones they want to use. This type of advantage is very powerful in Daggerheart because you're much more likely to roll with hope. Then both players will get to roll their damage die and add the results together, making the attack much more powerful and more likely to cause severe wounds to whomsoever is on the receiving end. Overall, I personally find Daggerheart combat much easier to balance, and it flows from turn to turn pretty well, with the pattern usually being the player goes and then the DM goes. This makes a vastly more cinematic feeling experience, I think is friendlier to new players. But let's talk more about the GM side of things and the campaign frame system. I think this is one of the best mechanics that Daggerheart offers, and all I see is potential. While there are only a handful of these offered in the core book, I expect we'll see some standalone books that offer more, or them being offered in other books that have nothing to do with settings at all. Either way, I expect to see more campaign frames from Darrington Press. This is a framework you can use to start your own game by using one of the 6 offered in the core rulebook. These include the Witherwild, 5 Banners Burning, Beast Feast, Age of Umbra, Motherboard, and the Colossus of the Drylands, each with its own unique themes, mechanics, and starting hooks to get you going playing Daggerheart. The place where I think this mechanic shines is the ability for a DM to copy this structure for their own setting. The way these campaign frames are presented is the perfect way for you to think about your own, from pitching it to your players to thinking about worldwide effects that they will have to deal with on their adventure. Campaign frames are a great inclusion. I just want to see more. And on that note, I do think that this system is a little heavy on the GM creativity side. There isn't a lot of stock here, most of them being only like 8 pages long. This puts a lot of pressure on DMs to create their own adventures without much to lean on. I would love to see some full campaign modules come out for Daggerheart, alongside some other supporting material like a standalone monster manual or a book to help DMs specifically, like the Dungeon Master's Guide. I'm sure we can expect to see some more Daggerheart titles coming out soon, as there was a brief announcement for an Age of Umbra supplement when Critical Role did their short arc on their channel. Daggerheart is a great game, and worth a try if you're looking for a new TTRPG to dip your toes into. There is a free quick start adventure for anyone to try from their open beta, and includes everything you would need to get started playing the game. Of course, there is so much more to Daggerheart than what I've covered here, and I regularly use examples from the game in my other videos. So if you're interested in this and other TTRPG content, go ahead and subscribe to my channel for more. And if you all want to see more Daggerheart content, let me know in the comments below. I have been your Tavern Keeper, and I hope to see you back in the tavern again soon. Stay safe, adventurer.